My next guest is Brad Dude. Brad was born in Joliet, Illinois in 1948 and grew up in Buena Vista, California. In 1970, he joined the Peace Corps in Micronesia as a volunteer English teacher and then served as a staff member in both Samoa and Micronesia. Since then, Brad has spent the past 40 years in the field of international development, training, and consulting. Brad has co authored two books and published three others on the value of personal temperament and its influence on self awareness, professional relationships, leadership, and productivity. He holds a journalism degree from Northern Illinois University. He currently conducts seminars on temperament and leadership while continuing his writing efforts. As the owner of Brad Dude and Associates, Inc., Brad continues to work and partner with colleagues at Next Level Consulting, the Ascend Development Group, and other organizations to provide consulting and training services to his clients. Brad recently served as co-coordinator of an executive leadership training program for government employees from Micronesia and Polynesia. He is also a principal in, help me with that, DevBiz Experts. Is that how you say it? Yes. A new company that provides services to nonprofits, government, and private sector organizations. Brad lives in New Orleans with his wife, Sue. He has one son and three grandsons. Welcome to the podcast, Brad.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Appreciate the introduction.
Well, tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
You know, one thing that comes to mind is when I was first doing training programs for new volunteers, new Peace Corps volunteers coming to the Marshall Islands. And we would do a 3-month training program. We had about 30 participants each time, some a little bit larger than that. This particular one I was thinking of is one where, during that training, we do cross-cultural training and language training and also technical training. And this particular program had about 30 English teachers. And so we were on the main island for most of that training, but about halfway through, we were able to go to what in the Marshall Islands, it's a number of islands, outer islands, about a 1-day voyage away by kind of a tramp steamer. And we went there and we were hosted by a village, and our participants lived with families and improved their language. And we would use their elementary school there as our teaching platform. And we had a great time. And when we ended our 2-week stay, we had there was a big farewell party for us, and everybody said goodbye, and flowered leis were given to everyone. And we had to march about a mile to get to the place where we were to pick up our ship. And everybody said goodbye, and our group kind of went through the paths and walked down to the end of that island, and there was no ship. And we finally got through by a walkie-talkie, and they said there was a trouble with the steamer, could not come, but be there the next day. So we had to camp out that night and did a little fishing and made fires, and everybody was pretty calm. And I was a little concerned that we were going to have a real problem, especially the next morning when I learned the ship was going to be delayed yet another day. The group decided, and I offered the option to go back to the village. Nobody wanted to do that. They thought it would be awkward to go back after we said goodbye. And so we ended up on the beach there, kind of camping out. And we had language teachers with us, local folks. We set up training classes right on the beach as we camped out. We had them had discussion groups on kind of what they took away cross-culturally from their living experience and also from their teaching experience. And so we kind of did some role plays for teaching. And so the teachers had a way of kind of debriefing that experience. And then when the ship came on the way back, about halfway to the main island, across our path was about a pod of about 200 dolphins, kind of in the sun, kind of splashing their way across the front of our ship, and everybody had just a great experience. So ended up having a very positive experience when I thought could be a disaster.
But what a better place to have some training right there on the beach in the South Pacific. And I've been to French Polynesia myself, so I know a little bit about, that's a great destination spot, but like, it's always known for luxury. But I was there as a, student and new teacher. So, kind of backpacking the first time I went there. But yeah, it's great to hear how you all were able to kind of make the best of the situation. you know,
Definitely not a luxury situation.
yeah.
These are very remote atolls that are, it's a developing country, and that's why the Peace Corps was there. And I enjoyed myself there. I was there first as a volunteer for 3 years, and then
Mhm.
as a teacher, and then eventually as a staff member there. And so I had about 8 years in Micronesia. It was a really enjoyable experience.
Mhm. Well, tell me a little bit about some of your books and articles. So, you wrote Finding Eden, and you told me that's an action adventure fiction about migration today. So, we'll talk about that one first.
Okay. Yes, I'm very excited about that. It's a novel. It's gotten some good reviews so far. It just came out in March, this last
Mhm.
March. Um, it is about migrants, kind of the challenges that migrants face today, trying to find a safe homeland. And I kind of used my Micronesian experience and outer
Mhm.
island experience to describe an island where, it's kind of a fantasy in a sense where um, uh, based on some facts that, like in Europe at the time, a few years ago, all the European ports were closed to anybody migrating there, especially
Mhm.
asylum seekers. Uh, and so I've got a ship full of African and Middle Eastern and South Asian migrants trying to get to Europe, denied entry. And so a challenge. Do we go to a European port and have to unload into a detention camp that gets people deported, uh, and many of them it's life threatening? Or do we head out to ocean and we found an island that they could go to at least as a temporary solution? So the island that they go to and try to survive there is kind of based on my experience out in the Pacific.
Okay. Okay. And then you also wrote the book, Quick, I Need to Be a Leader in 30 Days. So, um, it's to help people who get promoted. Often in the business world, you said people get promoted due to their tech skills, but they tend to micromanage. So, what can new leaders learn from reading that book?
Well, this came up. I was teaching leadership at Goddard Space Flight Center for NASA for about 9 years. We had three programs going on there during that time. And what I found, my participants were really brilliant people. They were scientists, engineers, and support administrative staff for that NASA site. Um, and we found that even though unquestionably they had technical skills and were promoted to team leader or division head, whatever their titles might be, into a management and supervisory role, it was because of their technical expertise. They were brilliant and got promoted. But what they found was that once they were promoted and had responsibility now for overseeing teams of 5 to 10 to larger numbers, they didn't kind of have a clue about how you're supposed to manage and lead such groups. And so my class kind of focused on giving them some tools and giving them some practical experiences and talking about followership and giving them some feedback on how they did. And so the book came out of that course. Um, I was going to do it as kind of a separate course and wrote the book as a complementary to that course, but also making it standalone so that if you couldn't attend a course, you could follow along. And I've got it day by day. So a leadership model, a exercise, and some discussion issues to talk with a coach or a mentor through every day of 30 days. To kind of come out at the end with being able to kind of hit the ground running, so that these technical folks don't have to micromanage. The idea about micromanagement is when all you have is your technical skill, that's what you do. And so over time, when you're a supervisor, your technical skills will diminish. you just can't help it because you're not doing that every day like you once did. And so oftentimes, because you kind of don't know what else to do, you end up looking over the shoulders of your workforce and doing it the way you, quote, used to do it, or you think you know how to do it the best. That gets into problems. Nobody likes a micromanager. Nobody wants their boss looking over their shoulder. So this book was an attempt to give some guidance into what you can do to kind of prepare yourself when you got that promotion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's good that people can buy the book aside from the course if their workplace is not conducting a course. And I will put the link in the show notes to your Amazon author page so people can find where those books are sold. Let's talk a little bit about some of the training that you provide. So, as you have mentioned, you worked at the NASA Goddard Flight Center. You've also worked at Langley Research Center and Department of the Interior. So, what is some of the training that you give to people in those companies?
Langley is a part of NASA. And so, in fact, that's the site of that movie Hidden Figures, if you remember seeing that, about the ladies who were doing all the calculations for some of the early space flights. Um, I did a leadership, it was kind of a similar course to what I was doing at Goddard. They wanted to try that in Langley as well. So I went down there to do that. And that's when we got into talking about self-awareness a lot and about temperament and how that influences the way a leader approaches the whole concept of leadership. Um, Department of Interior, that was a massive job of I led a team of 50 consultants, and we did a training needs assessment for the Bureau of Indian Affairs at that time. It was actually a trusteeship for the Native Americans. And so we sent consultants to 100 different locations across the states, building or trying to identify the needs of Native American workers who work for their tribe or the Bureau of Indian Affairs at the time. So it was very much an educational approach to try to identify some of the key needs they need. And sometimes that was in the financial side, the accounting side. Others was in kind of the educational side as well. So that was a fascinating project. It took several months to do that, and we did a major report for the Department of Interior and presented that as well. So I've been lucky in my career to do a variety of things, from doing it's all kind of training, educational development in many aspects, but I've been lucky to do it not only in interesting places like the different tribes around the country, to work in 30 plus countries around the world.
Yeah, I mean, it really have uh, a broad spectrum of just experience in different places. And I wanted to ask you, do you work sometimes with schools and school districts? You said in the pre-chat you have worked with a Montessori school. What are types of assessments that you do if you go into schools? Um,
Uh, I haven't done an assessment in a while for
mhm,
them. For Montessori, they were interested in a temperament workshop.
mhm,
And that was because some of the research has found that, especially problem kids,
mhm.
85% or so of students deemed problems, especially elementary school, we found that it's a temperament problem. And so teachers just wanted to be more aware of kind of a model of temperament so they can kind of better assess their own students and try to provide for them when they're, quote, acting up.
Yeah, and it's been a while, I think, since a lot of schools that I know of have done Myers-Briggs assessment, and I think it's usually up to the individual teacher, but even for leaders to think of doing something like that with their staff, that would probably show them a lot, especially if they're welcoming a new staff member or a
Yeah.
lot of staff members this year.
Well, there are a lot of personality tests. Myers-Briggs is the most famous. There are many others, DISC and Enneagram and a bunch of them. What I found at NASA when we kind of started doing our model of temperament was we found that our students, many who had our participants, I should say, many who had taken those tests, personality tests in the past, couldn't remember kind of what their scores were or
Mhm,
what it meant. Uh, and so it wasn't practical for
mhm,
them. You know, a lot of those personality tests are 16 boxes. It's hard to remember which of the 16 you are and what it
mhm,
all means. So, my colleague at the time, he's since passed away, Jim Harden, and I developed what we thought was a simpler model that was complementary to virtually every other uh, personality type test, but it focused kind of on the part of our personality that gets us in the most trouble. And especially in terms of leadership, gets us sometimes having problems with employees or our followers. And so we had great success with that. And many of the books on my website or that your readers or listeners can find deal with leadership and personality, leadership and temperament. And the model that we developed, we just call it the basic elements of temperament. We use earth, air, fire, and water as a way to categorize all of us, knowing that all four of those temperaments are in all of us,
mhm.
um, and that those elements kind of represent life on this planet, earth, air, fire, and water. So it was easier to kind of remember, especially that all four of those are within us. So a lot of our workshops, in terms of when we do a day of of temperament, we link it to leadership and how they interact with their colleagues, their families, mostly their employees and their followers.
You talked to me about the personal temperament in the pre-chat. So, define how you view personal temperament and its influence on self-awareness.
Well, self-awareness to me is the name of the game when it comes to leadership training. Um, and so we look at it, you know, temperament, anybody can, you know, Google that and look that up. It's that inborn aspect of our personality that influences how we view the world and look at the behaviors of others that we see. Our model of basic elements, earth, air, fire, and water, basically say that there are four of those major types of elements of temperament that we're born with, and we all have all four, but they're in a descending order, kind of like a stack of plates, of dinner plates. With the one that's most like us, we just call it the dominant temperament. Then there's one that's kind of like us, that's we call a secondary. There's the third is a tertiary, which is kind of when we see that kind of behavior in our followers or our employees, we're kind of neutral, doesn't give us any kind of emotion particularly. And the fourth, the last one, the one that's least like us, we call that our shadow temperament. And that's kind of what distinguishes our model, I think, from MBTI and some of the others. So we focus a lot on the shadow. The shadow temperament, again, is the temperament that is least like us, whether it's earth, air, fire, water. One of those is your dominant as your shadow temperament. And that typically means that when you see that kind of behavior, whatever that is for you, that's what typically we have a negative reaction to it. And that's what gets us in trouble. I'll give you an example. Um, so the Earths, they're the more traditional types, people that want to plan everything. Most teachers, I would say, are probably dominant Earth temperaments. They enjoy rules, regulations, a lot of planning. You know, line up, raise your hand. Banks, the military, those are all organizations that would be characterized as Earth organizations. Don't want to change what we're doing too much, follow directions, things like that. So that's Earth. Airs are kind of the ones that really enjoy competency. They judge what they see and the work of their employees as from a viewpoint of competency is the most important. In fact, they don't like dealing with the people too much. That they would rather not have to deal with employees very much, so they can be perceived as aloof sometimes. In the Big Bang Theory, it's the Sheldon character is the extreme example of somebody who's just out of touch with social skills, but brilliant
Mhm.
as a person. So we had earth, we have air, fires. Fires are more fun-loving folks. They're the real troubleshooters. They enjoy kind of like earth. They like rules and regulations only so that they can go around them, find innovative, creative ways of solving problems, doing things differently every day. And sometimes this causes difficulty if you're on earth and like your tradition and know what's going to happen tomorrow. Sometimes frustrating to have a leader who's a fire, who you never know what they're going to do. They go off, at the last minute, there's a change, and so everything gets changed. So earth, air, fire. Waters are your more people persons. These are leaders who um, every every kind of policy or rule or regulation, they look at it for its impact on the employees and on their people. They enjoy developing people. They're the ones that really enjoy going to training programs, holding training programs for their folks, looking for ways of advocating for their organization. Um, Waters. A problem waters sometimes have is of saying no. They
Mhm.
have a hard time saying no. So some of the employees who work for water leaders are sometimes frustrated because all of a sudden they have to work a weekend or a holiday because their leader agreed to help out another division or something or take on extra work at the last minute. And so they're the ones that have to do that, to put in that time, sacrifice maybe some family time to get the job done. So we have earth, air, fire, water. So the whole idea is that we're all of us are dominant in one of those, and that means we view the world from that perspective, whether it's earth, air, fire, or water, whichever you feel you are. The most represents your view of the world and yourself. And whichever one is your shadow is the one that typically may cause you some problems. So that's kind of the model that we use. And certainly with in our leadership courses, we would talk about the shadow and look at situations of how your shadow influences that. You could have a dominant earth who's really doing, from their perspective, a really good job and following the rules exactly. And you might have a fire, and, a dominant fire who you work for that can't stand the monotony of doing the same thing over and over the same way all the time. So we do a lot of interplay between all of those temperaments through our workshop to try to, our goal is to develop all of our temperaments, including our shadow temperament. We want people to use them more effectively. So that's kind of a thumbnail of what we do with that temperament.
Yeah, I mean, that's good to kind of get a detailed description on each of those temperaments. And would people be able to read more about that on your website? I know there is a LinkedIn group that I'm linking in the show notes. There's a Temperament Leadership Network. Would there be a lot of reading materials on that LinkedIn group?
Yes, we have um, on the LinkedIn. That's more of a kind of a chat
Mhm.
about issues around leadership and temperament. We
Okay.
have it on Facebook as well. So we've got Facebook as well as LinkedIn groups. Um, we've got uh, we've got some videos on YouTube channel that kind of describes the books in more detail and temperament in general. Um, like you mentioned, I've got 5 or 6 books on leadership and temperament on the website as well. And they're a lot of fun. They're very quick reads. They're trying to be as practical as possible, because if they're not practical, to me, that's what kind of bogged people down and using other personality tests. They just couldn't, they got lost in all the minutia of the 16 boxes or whatever it was. So we tried to simplify things so people could remember it. But yet our models are all complementary to all those other models as well. We weren't trying to create something new. We were just trying to kind of package it a little bit more and focus more than they do in general on the shadow temperament.
I'm interested in talking a little bit about how the temperament applies to work with the companies in Micronesia, for example. I had one other podcast guest, Jennifer Abrams, and she's worked a lot with international schools and some private schools or American schools abroad. And how do you view your work with, how the culture might be different in those countries and then applying these temperament principles?
Yes, I did. I've done temperament workshops all over the Pacific, from American Samoa to Republic of Palau and throughout Micronesia as well, up in Guam and Saipan. Um, they all understood the concept right away. They all, and in our live workshops, we have small group discussions based on their dominant temperament. So they self-select themselves after kind of hearing much more about what each one is. And so we have them sit in circles in their dominant groups. So a circle of earths, a circle of airs, a circle of waters, a circle of fires, and give them some discussion questions. Uh, and I had no problem with them getting into those groups. Nobody said, "Hey, this doesn't fit me," at all. So I was happy to hear that. Um, I think the challenge some of them have is when the culture, for an example, many island cultures, uh, the water temperament is very highly valued.
Mhm.
And when you think about it, small islands, you don't want to have conflict, because that would lead to a terrible life on a small island with only hundreds of thousands of people, hundreds and a few thousand, I should say, of people. So what I found was that although they're born with, let's say, an air temperament where they are interested in really information and data and competency, and they want to be competent themselves, what's valued usually in their village, in their home, in their work, is water, of pleasing other people, helping other people, a lot. So what we found is that, and it's like in the real world here, when we think about this model applying to scientists and engineers, um, you can operate, and there's no job you can't do because of your temperament. It just means that you've got a bias inside for being competent in this example, but you can operate in a world of a water world. You know, I'm doing a leadership quiz that's going to be coming out soon, so people can kind of test themselves and where they think they are. And all, you can be a dominant fire, for an example, and not want to do things the same way, but you might get a job in a bank, and the bank is very structured, rules, processes, procedures, follow the lines, and fill out the forms. It's not that you can't do that as a dominant fire. It's just that it may cause you a little bit more stress as you get into that, and learn how to do it. You may need more vacation or something to kind of deal with that stress, but it doesn't mean you can't do it. You can do it. So it's not, the model is not used to disqualify anybody from a job. It's just to have them more self-aware, that why are you feeling stressed, or why are you feeling tired a lot. Could be because you are a earth working in a water organization that takes, and it's going to take you time to recover a little bit more than somebody else who has a dominant water.
Yeah, that's interesting how, depending on where you live or the organization you work in, sometimes your, temperament you're born with isn't necessarily the temperament that you tend to have in the workplace. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I know, as an example, the police department. You
Mhm.
think police, what do we need for police? Well, we need those, there probably need earths and we need fires. There's rules, regulations, laws, et cetera, et cetera. But don't we need some water folks in there that, dominant waters who can, uh, work well with people and understand the plight of people that they work with. I think we need of all those temperaments in every job that we have, uh, and certainly as a leader, we want to develop all four of the temperaments so that we can be much more effective and sensitive in how we lead our organizations and teams.
Mhm. Yeah, so I would highly recommend leaders who are working with new teams or starting off the school year to check out some of those resources that I'll be linking in the show notes. Out of everything we talked about temperament, about some of the places you worked at, and just the leadership in general, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
I think for me, the whole idea that, no matter where you are in your organization, you can be a leader. That's one of the things that came out, especially in our many years working at NASA, that, even at the lowest rung in your organization, you can exhibit leadership skills. And the first one is, to me, and one of the most important is being self aware. Whether you're looking at our temperament model or you're taking an MBTI test and trying to understand 16 boxes, or reading more about it, I think it's important to know that, you don't have to wait till you have that position power, that title,
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
make you a leader or a manager. Wherever you sit, you can lead. And being self aware of yourself and how you're reacting to those, around you, is, critical for success.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's great to remember. Well, where can people find you online?
The best way is, on my website, which is, braddude.com. And I've got kind of links to all the books there that goes, mostly to Amazon. Yeah, right to Amazon, as well as, ways of contacting for, possible consulting or work like that. So, I, really enjoyed our time to chat about that. I hope people do contact me and take a look at some of our books. Especially, I'm really proud right now of that Finding Eden, the new, action adventure novel. I think people will get a kick out of that, and it shows leadership in an international, cross cultural basis there too.
And for teachers, would that be an appropriate resource maybe to read at the middle school or high school level?
Finding Eden.
Mhm.
It's probably a little bit more, at the high school and
Mhm.
above, level, I would say,
Okay.
on it, because we're dealing with the shipwreck and pirates and things like that, as well. But I think for teachers, especially, I think some of our primers, our earlier books on, dealing with, 40 way. I think one is called 40 Ways of Dealing with Figuring Out Your Boss, 40 Ways of Figuring Out Your Boss. And I would go through, each one. If you have an earth boss, a water boss, fire, or air, boss. So, I think teachers would get a kick out of the nonfiction, but I hope they also take a chance at the look at the fiction we have too.
Mhm. Great, great. Well, I hope people connect with you and find out a lot from those resources I'll have linked. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the Out of the Trenches podcast today. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Dana. Appreciate